education would be like 10 years from now, from Professor Stephen Heppel. But what about the current challenges that the education sector faces today? How do we prepare the young minds for the future? To shed light on this, we are privileged to have with us Mr. Vikas Pota, CEO of the Varkey Foundation, a major global education foundation seeking to improve global teacher capacity and promote universal access to quality education. He has spearheaded the training of over 25,000 tech teachers and has pioneered an innovative technology platform to reach marginalized girls in Sub-Saharan Africa, as well as addressing the refugee crisis using the same platform. He has designed a leadership program for school directors in Argentina, convenes the Global Education and Skills Forum, and organizes the Global Teacher Prize, which seeks to celebrate the achievement of classroom teachers and uplift the status of this profession. We're privileged to have you with us today, sir.
Jai Janendra. I think the previous panel said that they're standing between you and lunch. Actually, it's me that's standing between you and lunch, so I'm going to try and keep my remarks very brief. I speak from the context of running a family foundation, a philanthropic foundation. And in all of this journey, I'll tell you of some of my learnings. And I want to present them as learnings as opposed to conclusions. We're in this process of understanding what really moves the needle. And I know that in this room we have very many people who are charitable and philanthropic, and I'd love to hear your views on some of these subjects. First and foremost, I want to thank JITO in particular. There's many fora like these that exist around the world, and seldom do they give this much space to education. We attend the World Economic Forum in Davos. They speak about skill shortage, they talk about economy, they talk about disrupting society, but not once do they actually talk about on what basis, what foundations is this disruption going to be based on what foundation is our economy going to grow from. And so for that reason, I congratulate all of you and this organization in particular for providing this platform. I want to talk a little bit about what the global macro scene is first, and then I will make some comments on India, and then we'll broaden out again. And there'll be an opportunity perhaps for me to ask you questions and to interact on that basis. So in the year 2000, the UN in particular set something called the Millennium Development Goals, which you may have heard of. These were a set of targets that every government had signed up to, saying that we will do everything we can to make our world more healthier, prosperous, safe, peaceful, and so on and so forth. And it was a 15-year target. In 2015, the Millennium Development Goals came to a close, and the results were mixed. The big target in education that they set was to do with making sure every child actually goes to school. Okay, so it was about access to education. Then in 2015, a new set of targets was developed called the Sustainable Development Goals. And the focus changed to the quality paradigm, where everyone looked at, rather than just getting children into schools, how do we make sure that every child around the world, and not just in developed countries, prospers, does well, and is able to contribute meaningfully to society. These quality measures are now 2.5 years in. And when you look at the overall context, where we're coming from to where we need to go to is a Herculean task. I'll give you an example. The goal from 2000, which was to get every child in school, missed. 59 million children still do not go to school today in the world. The vast majority of these are in Sub-Saharan Africa. If you take a quality measure such as failing schools, there are almost 500 million children today who go to failing schools. 500 million children today. And these are government statistics. They're not mine. I've not manufactured them. These are taken from official statistics agencies of these governments to tell you that the accumulated number is 500 million children. Now, when we look at education, and we all understand that no education system, I think, at least, can be better than the quality of its teaching workforce. We understand that teachers are critical to deliver education because that's what they do, and they're trained for that in that regard. There are some 69 million new teachers required between now and 2030 to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. 69 million new teachers. So that's the macro context that I want to put in front of you. And you, as philanthropists, as business people, as people interested in the subject of education, have, I think, a perspective to take, a view to take on this, and how we address this. If you take India at first glance, it was making fantastic progress towards achieving universal education. Your government's figures showed that more children are in education than ever before. Nearly 97% of children are in primary school, 15% more than what was the case in 2001. And much of this increase is down to girls entering elementary education, up over 26% from 2001. There are also more schools than ever. The total number of primary schools has increased by over 34% since 2000, while the total number of schools imparting upper primary education has also increased by a staggering 186%. So on the figure, or when you take the Millennium Development Goals about access to education, India has made significant strides. The issue that we have is with the quality. And so when you look at the schools, and of course we in the West over here, and of course my ancestry is Indian, we feel very proud of the progress that India makes. We hear about the IITs, the IIMs, we hear about how Silicon Valley is full of Indians. We see all these chief executives of these companies that are of Indian heritage. Makes us very proud. But if you take some simple things, so the government in India put in place, after I think it's 3 years of a bachelor's of education degree, a teacher has to go through a teacher eligibility test. The first time it was done, I think it was 2014, only 3 years ago. You know how many teachers passed that test? This is after studying for a bachelor's of education. Let's hazard a guess. Who wants to have a go? What percentage of teachers pass that test after sitting for 3 years a bachelor's of education degree? Please put your hands up if you want to give a guess. Sorry? 25%, okay. Less than 10%. Anyone else? So the answer, my friends, is 1%. Okay, so put it into context. And sure, you may say, is that the test that was the fault? And over time, it's getting better. Let's not look at it negatively. It is getting better. More and more teachers are passing this test. But it perhaps gives you it's a barometer of how big the problem we face is in India. And I don't want to make it an isolated incident saying this is only in India, because I've told you the figures from advance saying that this is how catastrophic the situation is. So when we look at teacher shortages and teacher quality, research by a very famous Indian education organization called Pratham indicates that children leaving primary school can't do simple addition or division problems, nor can they read simple sentences in English. And in many cases, Pratham's research has concluded that year-on-year learning outcomes are actually getting worse. So I'll do this test now. What percentage of primary school students in year 3 are able to read year 1 level texts? What percentage of primary school students in year 3 are able to read year 1 level texts? Who wants to have a guess? What percentage? So this is after studying. You're in school, right? Okay, so 30%, 10%, you're a 10%er. 10x, I think, is the theme, right? Well, it's 42%. 42% of primary school students in year 3 are able to read year 1 texts. That doesn't make me happy. Just 26% of children in year 5 can do simple division problems, and reading levels at year 5 had not improved between 2011 and 2016. Last year, just 45% of children in year 8 could read simple sentences in English, down from 60% in 2009. So when you look at the issues and the challenges, they're massive. So you as business people and philanthropists, what are we going to do about it? We have decided at this foundation that where we're going to focus is on the teacher problem and the teacher crisis. In the world over, there's a teacher recruitment and retention crisis. In this country, it's no different. The government decides not to call it that. They say there are various challenges. They're trying to put in new structures, new initiatives, which is all good. But to call it anything else but a crisis is absolutely wrong. There's only a few countries in the world that are oversupplying teachers in their education systems. But even when you oversupply, you have to think in terms of, well, what is the caliber of student that is going into the teaching profession? And these are the things that I wanted to speak to you about in terms of, well, how is it that you would fix this? So we as a family foundation, what we've looked at is, there's a certain number of things that you can do in education. You can provide more funding, you can ease the workload of teachers, but predominantly education is run by government. It's a public sector subject, it's a public good. You yourself cannot give more money. It's a state problem, it's a state challenge. You cannot reduce the workload in a school because that is the state-run system. What is it that you and I can do? That is the question. And we've decided that we will focus on the subject of the status of teachers. You come from a country where it has coined the term guru. Tell me, do we look at teachers as gurus today? No. And this is not just to do with India. When we look at a study that we conducted in the year 2013 on the global status of teachers, we found only in China that teachers are seen in the same regard as doctors. Everywhere else, it's a middle to low-ranking social status profession. I, as a Gujarati, if I told my parents I wanted to become a teacher, I would have got a clip around my ear. So why aren't you an entrepreneur? Why aren't you a doctor, an engineer, an accountant, a lawyer, which I'm sure the vast majority of people in this room are. The question is, we have to realize that actually peaceful, harmonious societies will not happen without teachers. And if we are committed to that ideal, then we have to put our money where our mouth is. We have to take action and make sure that we celebrate teachers as a way of catalyzing the next generation to consider it as a viable profession. Otherwise, why will the next generation proactively think about going into the teaching profession? And that is what I want to talk to you about today. So what we did was we launched a teacher prize. Teacher prizes are not new. India has a huge amount of teacher prizes. And the rest of the world has been giving prizes to teachers for quite a long time. We decided to also do the same thing, but we decided to create a global prize, and we attached $1 million prize for the winning teacher. The $1 million is a gimmick, given that. It's a gimmick because it draws attention. You would say $1 million for a teacher? Does that even sound right? But hey, the Nobel Prize gives $1 million and you don't talk about it. But for a teacher, all of a sudden it seems outrageous to get $1 million prize. But however, through that prize, we have uncovered some incredible stories of success. We have some magical teachers who perform feats in classrooms that are just unimaginable. But no one knows about them. And because no one knows about them, you don't celebrate them. I live in northwest London, in Northwood, and every night when our daughters come home at dinner, we talk about education at the table. How was your school? Often we will say very negative things. That school, that teacher didn't do this, or there's too much homework, or the girls would complain. And you think, well, how do I turn this discussion about, there's this maths teacher who's just most incredible. That is the effort that we have to undertake. That is that responsibility of every single person over here to undertake. Say, go and thank a teacher for the job that they do. And it's a very simple ask. What is your theory of change? It's a very famous question in development work. Theory of change is very simple. Pat them on the back. What is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? They talk about motivation, and they say, what is one of the biggest motivating factors that you can have? Well, pat someone on the back. Tell them they're doing a good job. How many of you did that? How many of you have done that in the last year? Forget last week. And I guess it would probably be a limited number, if any. So you as enlightened beings and as captains of industry, we have a responsibility when we talk about 10x, whether it's in the banking field, whether it's in your business and manufacturing, whether it's in real estate, whatever it is, it's not going to happen if we don't have the skills space, if we don't have an educated workforce, if we haven't invested in human capital. However, the thing that you miss, and that's a great soundbite, the thing that you miss is how do you actually do it? And you do it, yes, by having schools. Yes, you do it by making sure kids go, making sure girls have the same opportunities. But the biggest thing I think you can do is by investing in the teacher workforce. And when we think about philanthropy, we do it very quietly. Many of us over here will have corporate social responsibility checks that we've given. I think there's also a cess in India that's saying 1% of your turnover must go into these things. Think about how you strengthen public education systems, because vastly those are the ones that will deliver the workforce for the future. So when you think about private schools, and the person I work for is a private school entrepreneur, even he will say, actually, how do we strengthen public education systems? Because 99% of the population in many countries will only have that choice. How do you make it better for them? And that is what I want to encourage you to think about, because when it comes to philanthropy, it's easy just doing your own thing. It's easy just giving a check to a school or sponsoring a school feeding program, a school meals program, a scholarship program. That is all well and good. But what about strengthening it for the vast majority of people? And we need to engage with the public sector in order to achieve that. There is no other solution, my friends. You can be disruptive as much as you want in your businesses. Bring that disruption to the public sector is the biggest thing that you can do from your skills base. I'm happy to take questions.
What do you do at Varkey Foundation?
What do we do is the question. So we have committed to invest in the capacity building of the teaching profession. So in this 8 years that I've been running this foundation, we have looked at how we move the needle when it comes to teacher training. In India, you have a lot of teacher training institutions, and in fact, the private sector have set up a lot of teacher training institutions, but the statistics show that they're pretty bad. And so you have to think about what is the world-class teacher training that you need to do. And again, I urge you to think about what is the world-class teacher training that the public sector can do, and how can you strengthen and reinforce that. That's one thing. We give grants to organizations from around the world who also strengthen the hand of the teacher. And we do a lot of advocacy work through our research, through our prize, through conferences and convenings. And we're about to launch a fund, a £50 million fund, that actually looks at investing in technology and innovation that strengthens the teacher's hand in the classroom. So if you have any other questions, I'm happy to take them as well. But you and your philanthropy, I'm interested. You and your philanthropy, what do you do in education? And how does that chime with what I've said and your experience in India? There's a lady at the back, is that right?
Hello, this is Manju here from Chennai, and I'm associated with a kind of scholarship program for government and corporation school students, in which we recognize academic achievers, and we complement their skills to match at par with the private school students by having training sessions in our company premises. So it has been running for about 20 years and has been a very kind of successful program as we see the students coming out and going and doing well in their personal lives and professional lives. In the meantime, we also observe that there is a teacher, as you have spotted the right thing, that teacher doesn't get appreciation. Mm-hmm. And we try to overcome that. And the key thing which recently we have been observing, but we don't know how to address it, is the teacher-student ratio in the schools, in the government and corporation schools. There are limitations. We accept that there are limitations. The government schools, we can't increase the teachers, nor we can decrease the class size. They have their own constraints. So what I would like to know from you, have you done any research or any educational methods that could be given to the teachers or coached to the teachers, that they can still provide a better attention to the students in whatever class size they have? Or any insights that you would be having with your work you are doing with the teachers? I would like to know that, yeah.
Thank you for that. I think the question we all have to ask, when we're spending money, is how do you actually affect system change? How do you make it systemic? I love the fact that you do scholarships. I don't fault anyone for doing that. I love the fact that we build schools for communities. But how does it impact the system? Because I think that's where we have to fuse this, because the vast majority of children are in government schools. And all the learnings that you bring in terms of, from your philanthropy have to be applied to the vast majority, I think. That is what we need to look at, and that's what we need to apply. The second point is, with regards to, I talked about the Sustainable Development Goals and the huge crisis in learning that there exists. I think there's a huge private sector opportunity. Private sector can contribute so much to this simply because there's a shortage of capital in government systems to fund this. There's something like to finance the Sustainable Development Goal we need $1 trillion. Even if all the governments come together, they're not going to do that. So you think in terms of your pool of money, whatever it is, how will it contribute towards that? And how do we really move the dial for the vast majority of children as opposed to just a few? That's what I'd like to encourage you to do. There's someone else, I know you've asked a question, we'll come back to you. Sir.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those vital statistics. And I think what you mentioned is that this is like...
There's a microphone, sorry.
This is a crisis, and that's very alarming.
Yes.
Do your foundation have a presence in India? Or do you intend to, venture out there? Or you just limited to UK?
No, actually, we don't do much work in the UK either. We work predominantly in Sub-Saharan Africa and in Argentina and Latin America. I do work for an Indian entrepreneur who lives in Dubai. And for many reasons, we haven't gone to India yet, if I'm being totally frank with you. What we as diaspora communities, I don't know if you live here or in India.
In India.
In diaspora communities, we struggle with this problem of having rose-tinted glasses when it comes to India. And you end up inevitably making a lot of mistakes. So at the beginning of our journey, we thought we'd be on safer ground to go somewhere else that we understand a lot more, that we wouldn't use that prism. But yes, there is a time coming to think about India.
I think those statistics that you mentioned, are they relevant to India as well?
Yes, absolutely.
They might be versa.
No, India has got a shocking crisis. There's no other ways of putting it. And actually, there's a lot of institutions in India that are plugging away and doing a really good job. I'll name some foundations so that you're aware of them. The first being Central Square Foundation, which was set up by a PE entrepreneur. I think they do fantastic work. There's an organization called Akanksha in Maharashtra that does fantastic work in running 20-25 schools, and there's a lot of learning that can come from that. There's the Azim Premji Foundation who do fantastic work in teacher training. They've set up a university in Bangalore. There's Teach for India that is addressing this exact problem, which is how do you get high caliber graduates to actually consider teaching as a profession? And they put them through this program, hoping that they will stick to education as opposed to the law, the medicine, the finance worlds. So these are institutions that you could also support.
Thank you.
Please. What is your name, ma'am?
Ekta. Yes, the statistics were quite alarming, especially when you said 1% of Indian teachers. I would speak from the Indian side. 1% of the Indian teachers are not good enough to take the exams that you were talking about. There's something that...
No, only 1% were good enough.
Were good enough, sorry. Were good
99% failed.
Failed, exactly. One reason why I think personally is that every other profession, be it a doctor, you do a surgery or something, the patient comes back and thanks you for the job. Are you a lawyer? You're saving somebody. As a teacher, you're doing a huge favor to that every child who's sitting in the room. But because you cannot see the return immediately,
correct,
the teachers are not motivated enough. Because for them, it's more like a salary that I take back home in the end of the month, not realizing that I'm sure that every child, all of us when we were children and the children today, irrespective of the digital media and everything, if you first ask them when they were in their first day of school, maybe that initial period, what would you want to grow up to be? They would always say a teacher. Because that was what they looked up to. Okay. Apart from their parents, they would look up to a teacher. But because the return was not enough for a teacher, she's not motivated enough to realize the impact she's creating. So is there something that we can do to make these teachers realize that they're really the gurus, really the God sent, because they are actually shaping the society, the country, not just the student. But because their return comes after maybe 20 years or 30 years. A student who was well taught at a young age goes back and thanks at 30s and 40s. So there's no motivation for the teacher to think, why is she doing that job? So is there something that...
I think you as a parent have a bigger role to play in saying thank you at the school gate every day. I think if you just did that, I think that would make a massive difference. Actually, they say the OECD actually says that the biggest difference, the biggest lever that you have in making sure that your child's outcomes are better or whose education is better is a very simple question. You ask them when you come home, how was your day?
Yes.
It's a very simple thing. In a similar way, how do you make a difference to the teaching profession? When you pick up your children at school, I hope it is you that picks them up.
Absolutely.
You say to them, thank you for what you do. You won't believe the impact that has.
It does. And that's why, see, we're a very small community. We're talking about the government. So is there something that we can do, that we can make the teachers realize their importance? It's not the paycheck that they take back home.
No, like I said to
More
you,
than that.
this is a public sector subject. Education is run by government. Unless you're willing to supplement the salaries, which I don't suggest you do, actually. I think, I'd rather everyone here pays their taxes. So I think that's the way to do it, if you ask me. Any other questions? There's a gentleman over there. Sorry, we'll go there first. And then there's someone over here, right, as well. So we'll go with you. So, okay, the microphone's there. We'll go there first. We'll come to you.
Sorry, I seem to have jumped the queue there.
That's okay.
My name is Nemish. An example
Nemish.
I quote on the plane coming in was a movie, Chalk and Duster. Some of the Indian delegates would have seen it. It's about some teachers, and they were assessed to be poor because they were old. And then it ended up in a very Bollywood-style melodramatic showdown in the style of that question program, I forget. But they had to answer 10 questions, get them right, and the prize went up. If they failed, they were fired and they could never teach again. It was a very interesting movie. I recommend it to you. And it really addresses this point.
Great.
That the teachers were told, you're too old, you're not suitable. But what I wanted to say actually was a different thing. After the Bhuj earthquake, a lot of money went from the UK.
Yes.
We created shelters and housing, and even villages were put up. But we found one family in particular, the schools were not able to teach because there were no teachers willing to come to the rural area.
Correct.
So what we did in the end was, through some religious bodies, we set up teacher training colleges, teacher training schools. I'm not sure at the moment what the quality of teacher training is in those colleges, but it was a start to, actually address the issue not of putting up the school, but creating some teachers to fulfill whatever was there already. So maybe that's an area where charitable work can go on.
Absolutely. I think we all should pay a great interest in this. There's a gentleman over here. If you can get the mic to him, please.
Thank you. Some great thoughts. My name is Bhupendra Sethia. I'm traveling from Australia, and your topic is very close to my heart because I've been in education for the last 10 years. Couple of things that I wanted to say was, one is we really need to focus on teacher capability development. Once we have teachers in the system, that's it. They get outdated very soon, and we do not pay attention on their capability development, on getting them up to date with the current knowledge, current systems. And I think World Bank and UN, United Nations, are doing a big piece of work around this. From University of Melbourne, we're going to be training 500,000 teachers in Dubai. We're doing a big project in Vietnam. But India is really lacking behind in that area. The second point is that the pay rates for teachers in India are absolutely appalling and pathetic. And going back to one of those comments there, as to what can we do for teachers, is pay them well,
Yeah.
Make it the most respectable job around the world, what teachers are paid. And what teachers are paid in India, it's not even 1/10 of the salary. So what can we do to firstly update them with the current knowledge? What can we do to actually reward and recognize them to what they're doing and contributing to the society? I think these are fundamental issues of a society, and if you're on the UNESCO board, you can take these issues, these chronic issues of some of the countries, and perhaps, step by step we can make some difference. Thank you.
Absolutely, that is the hope. There's a characterization of teachers that exists, which I think is grossly unfair, but it's easy to fall in this trap, which is to say teachers are lazy. We go around the world, and we do work in Ghana, for example, and they'll say teacher absenteeism is chronic. Actually, you go to schools where there should be 30 teachers, and there's only two in the entire school, not even 2 in the classroom. And you think, wow, these teachers, so and so, you start swearing and effing and blinding about them. Actually, the problem is that they don't also get paid. So how do you expect them to put food on the table? You expect them to get second jobs, third jobs, fourth jobs to make sure their ends meet. And it's easy for us to say malign the teacher, but actually what we should be doing is taking the education minister or the prime minister, president of the country, and actually, hitting them all over the park to make sure that this happens. But the thing is that we're too scared to say that. And it's easy habit to say, it's the teacher's fault. And so I agree with you absolutely, saying that teachers are, I think, really treated badly and unfairly, and we should do everything about that. There's a question over here.
I think the systemic problem solving is a fundamental for this teaching crisis. So one experiment which we did, which was working out, can we use college student to inspire a school student? And it's working in 19 colleges across 40 schools, where second years student go and build diary of dreams to the 9th standard student to 10th standard student. So we define in Last Trust some 20 modules which is taught by the college student to the school student. It's a mutual learning process which happens. A college student, when he goes and teaches the school student, he learns more by teaching. He becomes more responsible. They get a better jobs, employability, because they get a confidence in doing it. And school students get some external person who is inspiring and having a structured program of how his learning process happens. So the thought process is that if I shape the thinking of the college faculty, first train the college faculty, which is available, of engineering colleges or other colleges. Then they train the college students, and college students, if they link to the school student, some portion of the load of the teacher capacity can be unloaded in this process.
That's a great suggestion. We have time for one more question. Anyone want to try? Okay, so, you as entrepreneurs and philanthropists, what is it that we can do, and where does the opportunity lie? I think I want to emphasize that a little bit. As entrepreneurs, you create markets. You are opportunistic. You try to do everything to leapfrog. You understand what competition means and how you will thrive in that competitive landscape. You understand to build a business, you put in processes. You excel in making sure that your people stay with you. You excel in making sure governance is great. I think that's a given, especially the size of businesses that are represented over here. Well, all of these things are required in the education sector. All of these things, your skills, your experience can be leveraged for the benefit of society. You are responsible in terms of, you can be responsible for World War III not taking place next week. You can be responsible for making sure that North Korea does not detonate the nuclear bomb. You can be responsible for making sure people like Donald Trump do not come to office. You can be responsible for making sure that every child, when they go to sleep at night, is fed. You can be sure of all these things happening if you took an active interest. If you actually went to the coalface and you tried to strengthen your country's public education system, I'm sure wonders would happen. It is not a matter of just cutting a check. It is a matter of applying all of what you have learned through your businesses, through your lives, through your education, for the benefit of humanity. In India, you have a massive population, and people say it is the solution to our world's problems, actually. The age demographic profile that you have will create more workers to fuel economic growth for the next 100 years. But on what basis? If you look at these statistics, I really do question that notion. And that is why I think, not for today's generation, but for tomorrow's generation, you should play an active role in this. Mehul asked me to be controversial, so I'm trying to be more pointed about this before lunch. The actual theme of this talk was meant to be, how do you prepare children for the future of 2030 and beyond? Actually, I think it's a wonderful thing that people try to guess what the school of the future is, what education should look like. Actually, I'm more interested in what society will look like in the year 2030 and beyond, and because that is what the education systems will react to. And so when we talk about cryptocurrencies, we talk about autonomous cars, we talk about greenhouse gases, all of these things have an impact. And what you do in your lives through your businesses and your investments has an impact on the classroom as much as anything else. And that is why I lay the challenge to your door, which is, in order for children to prosper in the future, please engage meaningfully. I leave you with one quote, and if you are on social media, please do use this quote because I think it's pretty powerful. The Sustainable Development Goals are 17 goals. They range from reducing poverty, making sure our oceans are safer, making sure that we combat climate change. There's poverty targets, there's all kinds of targets. In education, and there's also SDG number 4 is on education, quality education, I think it's entirely misplaced. I think the UN have it massively incorrect and wrong to say that this is one of the 17 targets. Actually, the only target should be education, because without that, we are not going to achieve any of the other 16 goals. So the quote that I'll leave you with is, no matter what question, I repeat, no matter what question, whether it is conflict, war, poverty, inequality, disease, no matter what question, education is the answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please give him a round of applause. A couple of things he hasn't said, but I think I should. Vikas runs the Varkey Foundation, set up by Mr. Sunny Varkey, who you may have heard of. And Mr. Sunny Varkey also runs the GEM School Empire, the largest private school empire in the world. So they know a hell of a lot about education. They do a tremendous amount of work across the world. Vikas runs the big foundation, and the foundation has, over the last couple of years, has actually elevated the status of teachers massively with a global $1 million teacher prize, but also with what he's done after that. The teachers that have won this prize have gone around the world and evangelized what teaching should be. And if there is one thing that I can tell you, even today, that tells you the status of our teaching and learning, is look at the number of graduates who come out and 6 months later don't have a job. Even in this country, the number can be as high as 30%. They end up taking jobs that are manual, driving cabs, at restaurants, cleaning offices, admin. And that is not just here, it's everywhere, Middle East, Africa. So what it tells us is that the system doesn't now support its purpose, and its purpose has to be the well-being of people in employment and thereafter. So it's a huge crisis, and I'm really grateful that Vikas has come here and done that. So can I call a couple of people up on stage, please? I know we have Mr. Suresh Mutha with us, who is from Chennai. Please come on stage. And also Mr. Sanjay Gorawat, who runs a big college in Pune with a university with 14,000 people, I understand. And could we get a small token of appreciation to say thank you? So before we break, we have a very important announcement to make. Before that announcement is made, I just want to say, those of you who are coming this evening, it is a black tie do. We would like you to come in your tuxedos, national dress, whatever. It is also subject to screening at the House of Commons and maybe at the IOD. Please bring a passport photo or a passport or a driving license, some sort of government-issued ID. And if you're not on the list,